This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on enhancing India's maritime trade capabilities. The participants are P. Manoj, Economic Analyst, and Diksha Saxena, Akashvani Correspondent.
Maritime trade is a key player in sustaining the world's economy. It enables the cost-effective transfer of goods from manufacturing plants to the consumers across the world. To discuss more on the subject, we are joined by Mr. P. Manoj, Economy, Maritime and Trade Expert. Mr. Manoj, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Manoj, I would first like to talk to you about the maritime trade in Indian context. Could you please explain how the maritime trade is evolving in India?
So let me first start off by saying that India has got a 7,500 kilometer long coastline, both on the western and the eastern coast. And more than 90% of India's trade, export-import trade by volume, goes by the sea route and more than 70% by value. To that extent, India's maritime sector plays a very, very critical role in supporting India's trade. And by trade also I mean the larger economy, because India is now looking at a 5 trillion economy going to 7 trillion. And if we want to become a very competitive economy, competitive on the global stage, on the products and the services that we provide, maritime sector plays a very, very critical role.
Also, Mr. Manoj, I would like to understand from you what is the contribution of the maritime trade in the overall economy of the country. I would also request you to talk about the GDP and the numbers.
So India's economy is growing at about 7 to 8%. So more than 90% of India's trade by volume moves by the sea. So ports play a very important role. So because most of these are sent and received through the Indian ports. So India's ports has got a capacity of about 1,600 million tons of cargo they can handle, both the 12 government-owned major ports as well as there are many private ports, whereas we are handling about 1 billion to be precise, a little more than 1 billion. So there is adequate buffer that we have. But when we talk in terms of growing the economy and growing the trade, we need, as we go forward, we need more ports, more infrastructure, more capacity. That is what the government is trying to do right now, because there is a huge expansion program being undertaken by the government, both at the central level as also many state governments, because they know the importance of the port sector to the Indian economy. So that way we are expanding both at the state level. State means coastal states that have a waterfront, and also center holds 12 major ports. Now the 13th major port is now today, the foundation stone was laid by the Honorable Prime Minister today. So these are all going towards building India's port capacity, which is intrinsic to the trade.
Mr. Manoj, since you spoke about the private ports, all of us are aware that government ports and the private ports. I would like to talk to you about the private ports, especially how important is the participation of private sector and private ports when it comes to the entire maritime industry and maritime trade, and how is the government trying to push forward more of private participation in the sector?
The 12 major ports, they are owned by the government, but they are trying to become landlord ports, in the sense that landlord means the government will not be involved in the cargo handling operations. They will only be a landlord. They will do the basic infrastructure like breakwater and dredging, maintenance dredging to ensure that the channel and the berth have adequate depth and all that. In those things, private sector will not come. So what the cargo handling activities are being privatized, and for that they are inviting specialists in the field, top players in the industry. They come and there is a format under PPP model whereby they come and invest and operate for 30 years and if not more, and they have to share a certain percentage of their revenue as royalty to the government, and this works well. This model is what has been followed globally. So, and investors are more interested because of India's growing economy and trade, and given the fact that there is a huge business potential, investors are very much coming forward to invest in India's port sector, which is seen by the fact that, for instance, if you take a Jawaharlal Nehru Port near Mumbai, which is India's second biggest container port, all the cargo handling terminals are run by private entities. So like that in other ports like Visakhapatnam, Chennai, Kolkata, Kandla, whichever is the major port, they are being offered to the private investors for handling cargo. And in the state level, there are also privatization happening. Sometimes an entire port is given to the private sector, or like as I said, in the case of government-owned ports, some cargo terminals are being given to the private sector. And many of these projects, many of these tenders, if you look at it, they attract a lot of interest from bidders. I mean, you get 4 or 5 bidders in a tender, which is a reasonably big numbers to have. And they have come, and there are a lot of policy initiatives that has been taken. There is a model concession agreement which sets out the terms and conditions. Of course, in the initial stages, some many years ago, when we started out, we were at a learning stage. There were some issues and all that. But as we progressed, as we came to know about problems, as we faced problems, we rectified those problems, refined the documents, basis which it became more bankable, more lucrative for people to come and invest in the sector. So by and large, the stage Indian port sector has reached a mature stage where people are fairly comfortable investing in the Indian port sector.
Mr. Manoj, now I would like to draw your attention or draw your focus to today's event in Maharashtra. The Prime Minister laid the foundation stone of Vavan Port. The cost of this project is around 76,000 crore rupees. Could you please explain how significant it will be in enhancing the maritime trade?
This is going to be India's largest government-owned port. Let us keep aside Mundra. Mundra has got a little more capacity. It's a private port. But amongst India's union government-controlled ports, Vavan is going to be the largest in terms of capacity. It's not only about capacity, it is mostly a container port. Because a container cargo is the fastest growing cargo segment, where most of these consumer goods and FMCGs and many other parts and things like that are shipped, because it's a standardized container which can move seamlessly from sea to road to rail and to the customer's premises. So it is a multimodal thing. And Vadavan's location, being a deep draft port with minimal capital dredging, because you don't have to, dredging is a huge cost for building a new port. But here you have a natural depth of 20 meters and it requires very less capital dredging, but maybe some maintenance dredging. Plus the fact that it is located offshore and it is located on the western coast. Western coast has traditionally been when you compare to the eastern coast, western coast is much ahead in terms of cargo handling, traditionally, historically, because the cargo moves to the northwestern hinterland, which is the major cargo consuming and generating areas. So Vadavan's location, plus the fact that it is going to be linked to the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, which was announced last year, and also the international north-south transport corridor linking Russia and India, crisscrossing the land, sea, rail and all that. So if you look at it, I mean, you know the fact that the geopolitics currently is on a boil. The Middle East is on a boil these days because of conflicts. So nations that are involved in trade and in export-import and all that are looking at alternate trade routes. And in that, Vadavan is going to play a key role because it is located in such a manner that cargo can come from India, go through Vadavan and shipped to the nearest either Chabahar or someplace from where it can get onto the land and then go by road or rail to the eventual destinations and also on the return leg. So Vadavan is going to be positioned and it will also play a very, very critical role in India's search for alternate trade routes, not only for itself but also for other friendly nations who are looking at a safe passage without any problems for ships and for the cargo. Because you don't want to end up in a situation where you're going by ship and you have somebody who is firing at you, then your merchandise is at stake, there are a lot of crew whose life is at stake, the ship itself is carrying a lot of oil which will lead to disastrous consequences if it sinks and all that. So India that way is playing a key role in creating new trade routes, and for that Vadavan is a very important project in that respect.
Mr. Manoj, since you spoke about the security concerns, my next question was also on the same subject. So, what are the security concerns when it comes to maritime trade and especially maritime trade of India?
When you look at it, I mean, you know about the Red Sea crisis, because as I said earlier, the geopolitical situation in the Middle East with a lot of conflicts, tensions and things like that going on every day. Rockets and things like that have been launched on the ships and all that. So it has become a real problem for India's trade because a lot of our oil cargo comes from the Middle East and Suez Canal. Even through the Middle East, we go into the Suez Canal, and Suez Canal is the kind of link to the Europe and all that. So now after the Red Sea crisis, ships are going a longer way to detour via the Cape of Good Hope. That leads to extra time. There are a lot of extra time involved in sending the goods because of that longer route. So India needs, for the strategic and security reasons, India needs an alternate trade route. And not only that, China is the factory of the world, and China is dominating the world trade. And India is trying to match up to China in terms of manufacturing. And we are trying our level best to make India a manufacturing hub. For manufacturing hub, just to de-escalate and to insulate the global markets from its over-dependence on China. What happens and in a situation like COVID or a pandemic and all that, too much importance on one country is going to create problems for the supply chain. So friend-shoring, near-shoring, and for all those reasons, people are looking at India as an alternate destination. China plus one strategy. Along with China, there is another nation that they require to fall back on in terms of a crisis. So from that perspective, India is also trying to create. We are trying our level best in terms of policies, in terms of free trade agreements, in terms of infrastructure, ports, shipping, everything we are trying to create because we also don't want to be dependent too much on China or for that matter the world. So that way, India's maritime sector is also going to play a very important role.
Mr. Manoj, you spoke about the diplomacy and relations and geopolitics. So this brings me to my next question. What role is the maritime trade, or how important is maritime trade when it comes to economic diplomacy?
Maritime trade is critical in today's diplomatic era because, as I said, nothing moves because most of the cargo is coming by more than 90% is by the sea route only. So sea is a very big boon, and nations having coastlines are going to play a critical role. I often keep telling people that the importance of a coastline to a nation you will come to know only when you are a landlocked country and you are dependent on some other coastal country for your export-import needs. So that way countries, maritime nations know how important the sea, the coast is for them. So India been having a long coastline, and India's burgeoning economy, growing economy and trade. If we can leverage that with maritime, with other nations through free trade agreements and all that, it's going to be a win-win situation for all. I think, our External Affairs Minister being a diplomat himself, he's a master in doing all these things because he knows the importance of the diplomacy in maritime.
Lastly, Mr. Manoj, I would like to ask you how important it is to protect the Indian Ocean for maritime trade. Very briefly, if you could just explain this to us.
If you look at the Indian Ocean, there are many countries in the Indian Ocean, joining the Indian Ocean, who are looking to India because India being a growing economy and the demography, the market, the size of the market, India itself is a huge market for many people. So these nations surrounding the Indian Ocean, they're also looking at India as an investment destination, not only for progressing their own economy and also creating employment for them. It's a huge opportunity for them to come and invest in India, where India will also gain because India also needs capital. India is also looking at attracting foreign capital into its manufacturing, into its economy. So where Indian Ocean countries can come and access our markets, it's a huge market for them in terms of products and services and all that. So they in turn come and invest, and we will also benefit from that investment because capital is a scarce commodity these days. So that way, if you look at it, it's a good opportunity for those countries that are in the Indian Ocean rim to come and invest and look at India as an attractive destination. And India is playing the role of a facilitator, as a fulcrum. Many people are coming. India is the most sought after destination now. If you look at it, there are many players. Every day you see investments coming into India, many players investing in India. So I think, India is in a sweet spot now, in terms of not only attracting investment, given its huge coastline and its demography, its market, it's going to be a really good time for India to take off on the global stage.
Mr. Manoj, you spoke at length about the subject and your explanation was very lucid. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on the subject and sparing your valuable time for Akashvani News.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on enhancing India's maritime trade capabilities. The participants were P. Manoj, economic analyst, and Diksha Saxena, Akashvani correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsttalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.